In a distant corner of the galaxy on the lush jungle moon of Xylith Prime, humans were seen as little more than pests. They had been stranded there decades ago after their colony ship malfunctioned and crash-landed. Over time, they eked out an existence among the towering trees and bioluminescent plants that glowed softly in the perpetual twilight. To the native inhabitants, the insectoid Xylari humans were clumsy, fragile creatures who lacked both refinement and purpose. The Xylari ruled this world with grace and precision. Their society built around harmony with nature. Their queen, Silvara, was revered not just for her wisdom but also for her role as the spiritual heart of their hive mind culture. She communicated through shimmering pulses of light emitted from her crystalline exoskeleton, each pulse carrying emotions and thoughts too complex for human minds to fully comprehend. Humans, meanwhile, were tolerated at best a nuisance confined to the outer edges of Xylarian territory. Despite their low status, humanity's presence on Xylith Prime wasn't entirely ignored. Every few years, during the Festival of Unity, the Xylari would summon representatives from the human settlements. These gatherings were less about diplomacy and more about reminding the humans of their place. The Xylari viewed them as weak because they didn't share the same connection to the natural world or possess any advanced technology beyond what they scavenged from their ruined ship. This year's festival was different, though. Rumors spread like wildfire through the human camps. Something big was happening. Whispers spoke of unrest among the Xylari, whispers confirmed when scouts reported unusual activity near the Great Hive, sprawling structure made of interwoven vines and glowing resin deep within the jungle. Some said it was preparation for war. Others claimed it signaled internal strife within the hive itself. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the humans would be caught in the crossfire if things went south. Elliot Kane, a wiry mechanic, with grease-streaked hands and a knack for fixing broken machines, found himself reluctantly chosen as his settlement's representative. He wasn't a leader by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a reputation for thinking outside the box, a rare trait among people who had grown used to survival over innovation. As Elliot trudged toward the Great Hive alongside two other delegates, he couldn't shake the feeling that this trip might change everything. When they arrived, the scene before them took their breath away. Thousands of Xylari filled the clearing, their iridescent bodies pulsating with synchronized lights. At the center stood Queen Silvara, her form radiating an ethereal glow. Her voice translated into fragmented human speech via ancient devices, left behind by previous explorers, boomed across the crowd. "Harmony is threatened," she declared, her words heavy with meaning. "A shadow creeps upon us, seeking to disrupt balance. We must stand united." Before anyone could process what she meant, chaos erupted. A sudden rustling in the canopy above drew everyone's attention. From the shadows emerged a group of rogue Xylari, their exoskeletons dull and cracked, eyes burning with malice. They weren't part of the hive, they were outcasts, driven mad by some unknown force. And they had come armed. One of the rogues raised a bow tipped with a poisoned arrow, aiming directly at Silvara. Time seemed to slow as gasps rippled through the crowd. No one moved, not the Xylari guards frozen in shock, nor the human delegates rooted to the spot. But then, without hesitation, Elliot lunged forward. He didn't think. He didn't plan. All he knew was that the Queen's death would mean disaster for everyone, Xylari and human alike. With a grunt, he threw himself into the arrow's path, feeling its sharp tip pierce his shoulder. Pain exploded through him, but he stayed upright, clutching the wound as blood seeped between his fingers. Silence fell over the clearing. For a moment, no one moved. Then Silvara stepped forward, her glowing form hovering closer to Elliot. Her light pulsed rapidly, conveying confusion, awe, and something else entirely unfamiliar to her kind. "Why?" she asked, her translated voice trembling. "Why protect me?" Elliot managed a weak smile despite the agony coursing through him. "Because sometimes," he rasped, "doing the right thing doesn't need a reason." And with that, the Queen's gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable yet undeniably intrigued. Little did Elliot know, his impulsive act of bravery would set off a chain of events that would forever alter the fate of both species and, perhaps, even lead to an offer he never could have imagined. Elliot's impulsive act of heroism left the entire clearing in stunned silence. The rogue Xylari who had fired the poisoned arrow hesitated, their glowing eyes flickering with confusion as they processed what had just happened. Silvara, the queen, hovered closer to Elliot, her crystalline exoskeleton casting prismatic reflections across the ground. Her voice, translated into fragmented human speech by the ancient device around her neck, was soft but filled with an intensity that made everyone uneasy. "Why risk your life for mine?" she asked again, her light pulsing rapidly in patterns that hinted at curiosity and something deeper, perhaps even admiration. Elliot winced, clutching his wounded shoulder as he tried to steady himself. Blood seeped through his fingers, staining his tattered shirt, but he forced a weak grin. "I guess I figured you'd be harder to replace than me," he muttered. His voice strained but laced with humor. The crowd erupted into murmurs, humans whispering nervously among themselves. Xylari. Guards exchanging rapid pulses of light that no one else could understand. Even the rogue Xylari seemed taken aback, lowering their weapons slightly as if unsure how to proceed. It was clear that no one had expected a human species long dismissed as insignificant to step up in such a way. Silvara tilted her head, studying Elliot with unblinking eyes. "You are strange," she said finally, her tone almost contemplative. "Humans do not value sacrifice as we do, yet here you stand." Before Elliot could respond, the tension broke. The Xylari guards sprang into action, surrounding the rogue attackers and forcing them to retreat into the jungle. Shouts and bursts of light filled the air as the skirmish ended almost as quickly as it began. When the dust settled, only the humans and the loyal Xylari remained in the clearing. Elliot stumbled backward, his legs giving out beneath him. Two other human delegates rushed to his side, helping him sit down while someone tore off a strip of cloth to bind his wound. Despite the pain, Elliot couldn't help but notice how all eyes were on him now, not just the humans, but the Xylari, too. Their glowing forms pulsed in slow, rhythmic patterns, as though they were collectively trying to make sense of what had just transpired. Queen Silvara approached once more, her movements deliberate and regal. She extended one delicate limb toward Elliot, her claws retracting so as not to frighten him further. "You will come with me," she announced, her voice firm yet devoid of malice. "Your injury requires treatment, and there is much I wish to understand." Elliot blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what? You want me to go where?" "To the Great Hive," she replied simply, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Around them, the other humans exchanged alarmed glances. No human had ever been invited inside the hive before, at least not willingly. Most assumed it would mean certain death or worse. But before anyone could protest, Silvara added, "Do not fear. You have earned my trust, and perhaps gratitude." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Elliot looked around at his fellow delegates, who seemed torn between panic and awe. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "All right," he said, wincing as he stood up with their help. "But if this turns out to be some elaborate bug trap, I'm blaming all of you." The journey to the Great Hive was unlike anything Elliot had ever experienced. Surrounded by a procession of Xylari warriors, he was carried on a makeshift stretcher, fashioned from woven vines and glowing resin. The jungle around them came alive with sounds, chirps, clicks, and the occasional distant roar, but the Xylari moved with such precision and purpose that nothing dared to interfere as they approached. The hive, its sheer scale became apparent. Towering spires of intertwined vegetation stretched high into the sky, shimmering faintly under the moonlight. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed along its walls, their petals opening and closing in sync with the rhythm of the hive itself. It was both beautiful and alien, a stark reminder of how different these creatures were from humanity. Inside, the contrast was even more striking. The interior of the hive buzzed with activity, thousands of Xylari moving in perfect harmony. Some tended to glowing larvae nestled in honeycomb-like chambers, while others worked tirelessly to repair sections of the structure using secretions from their own bodies. The air hummed with energy, and Elliot felt small and out of place amidst it all. Silvara led him to a chamber near the heart of the hive, where healers immediately attended to his wound. They applied a sticky amber substance that numbed the pain almost instantly, sealing the injury with remarkable efficiency. As they worked, Silvara watched silently, her light pulsing in slow, thoughtful waves. When the healers finished, she spoke again. "You saved my life, Elliot Kane. Such an act demands repayment. Among my kind, debts must be honored." Elliot raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the smooth wall of the chamber. "So, what exactly does repayment look like for you guys? Do I get a lifetime supply of bug juice or something?" Silvara's light flickered briefly a sign. Elliot guessed of amusement. "No, what I offer is far greater. You will remain here as my guest and my advisor. Your actions today showed courage and selflessness, qualities we value deeply. Perhaps there's wisdom in your kind, after all." Elliot stared at her, dumbfounded. Advisor? To the Queen of the Xylery? He wasn't sure whether to feel honored or terrified. Before he could respond, Silvara turned and gestured for him to follow. She led him to another chamber, this one adorned with intricate carvings and glowing symbols etched into the walls. "This is the Hall of Reflection," she explained. "Here, decisions are made that shape the future of our people. I wish for you to see it and to understand why your presence matters." As Elliot took in the sight, he realized this was more than just an invitation, it was a test. The Xylery were intrigued by him, yes, but they were also wary. By bringing him here, Silvara was challenging her own assumptions about humanity. And Elliot, whether he liked it or not, was now at the center of something much bigger than himself. He glanced at the Queen, then back at the glowing hall around him. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, could this really change everything? Elliot's days in the great hive passed in a blur of wonder and unease. The Xylery treated him with a mix of reverence and curiosity, their glowing forms constantly pulsating as if trying to decode his every move. Each morning, Silvara summoned him to the Hall of Reflection, where she posed questions that ranged from profound to baffling. "Why do humans fight among themselves?" she asked one day. Another time she inquired, "What drives your need to create when survival is uncertain?" At first, Elliot struggled to answer. He wasn't used to thinking about humanity in such abstract terms. He was just a mechanic who fixed broken things for a living. But over time, he found himself reflecting on what it meant to be human. His responses became less hesitant, more thoughtful. "We fight because we're scared," he told her once. "And we create because, well, maybe it's our way of saying, we're alive." Silvara listened intently, her light patterns shifting subtly with each reply. To Elliot, it felt like she was piecing together a puzzle, one fragment at a time. Yet despite her growing fascination, not all Xylery shared her perspective. Whispers spread through the hive. Some viewed Elliot's presence as unnatural, even dangerous. A few openly questioned whether allowing a human into their sacred halls was wise. One evening, as Elliot wandered through the glowing corridors under the watchful eyes of Xylery guards, he encountered a group of workers tending to a damaged section of the hive. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, as they repaired cracks in the resin walls using secretions from their bodies. One worker paused, turning its head to study him. Its light flickered erratically, a sign of agitation. "You don't belong here," it said abruptly, its voice rougher and less refined than Silvara's translated speech. "You are weak, fragile. You bring chaos." Elliot froze, unsure how to respond. Before he could say anything, another Xylery intervened, a taller, more ornate figure, likely part of the hive's elite caste. "Enough," it commanded, its light pulsing sharply. "The Queen has decreed his presence. Do not question her will." The worker hesitated before returning to its task, but the encounter left Elliot shaken. For the first time, he realized that not everyone in the hive saw him as a hero or even as an ally. Doubts crept into his mind. Was he truly making a difference, or was he simply a pawn in some larger game? Meanwhile, tensions outside the hive continued to escalate. The rogue Xylari, who called themselves the Fractured, had grown bolder, launching raids on nearby settlements. What started as isolated attacks soon turned into coordinated assaults, targeting both human villages and loyalist Xylari outposts. It became clear that their goal was to destabilize the Hive's authority, and so, discord across Xyloth Prime, back in the human camps, fear spread like wildfire. Supplies dwindled as raiders destroyed food stores and sabotaged water sources. Desperation drove some settlers to consider abandoning their homes altogether. Leaders argued over whether to retaliate or seek refuge deeper in the jungle, far from both the Fractured and the Hive. When news of the escalating violence reached the Great Hive, Silvara convened an emergency council. Elliot was invited to attend. Much to the chagrin of several high-ranking Xylari officials, sitting amidst the luminous carvings of the Hall of Reflection, he listened as the Queen addressed her advisors. "The Fractured grow stronger," she declared, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "They exploit our weaknesses, preying on doubt and division. If we do not act swiftly, harmony will collapse, not only for us, but for all who dwell on this moon." One advisor stepped forward, its light pulsing rapidly. "Then let us destroy them. Send our warriors to eradicate the threat." "No," Silvara countered firmly. "Violence begets violence. We must find another way." Elliot raised his hand cautiously, drawing surprised looks from the assembled Xylari. When Silvara nodded for him to speak, he cleared his throat. "Maybe the problem isn't just the Fractured," he began. "From what I've heard, they feel abandoned by the Hive, like they don't belong anymore. Maybe instead of fighting them, you should try talking to them." The room fell silent. Several Xylari exchanged rapid pulses of disbelief, while others seemed intrigued. Finally, one elder spoke up. "Humans have no concept of unity. How can this outsider understand our struggles?" Elliot clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Because we've been there," he shot back. "Humans have fought wars, torn ourselves apart over differences. But sometimes the best solution isn't to fight, it's to listen. To show people they still matter." Silvara tilted her head, her light pulsing slowly as she considered his words. After a long pause, she turned to her advisors. "Prepare a delegation," she ordered. "We will reach out to the Fractured. And Elliot Kane, you will join us." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even Elliot was taken aback. "Wait, me? Why?" "Because," Silvara replied, her tone resolute, "you see value in understanding, and perhaps ... so will they." The journey to meet the Fractured was fraught with danger. Accompanied by a small group of elite Xylari warriors, Elliot trudged through dense jungle terrain, his senses on high alert. The air grew heavier as they approached the rogues' territory, marked by twisted vines and scorched earth, a stark contrast to the vibrant beauty of the Loyalist domain. When they finally encountered the Fractured, the tension was palpable. The rogue Xylari emerged from the shadows, their cracked exoskeletons glowing faintly with erratic pulses. One of them, a hulking figure with jagged spines protruding from its back, stepped forward, its eyes blazing with hostility. "What brings the Queen's lapdogs to our den?" it growled, its voice harsh and guttural. Silvara stepped ahead, her presence commanding yet calm. "We come seeking peace," she announced. "Not submission, but understanding," the rogue sneered. "You cast us aside, left us to rot, now you speak of unity?" Before Silvara could respond, Elliot stepped forward, ignoring the protests of the Xylari guards. "Look, I get it," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "You feel betrayed, angry. That doesn't mean you have to tear everything down. There's another way." For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly the rogue lowered its weapon, its light flickering uncertainly. "Why should we trust you?" it demanded. "Or any of you," Elliot met its gaze squarely. "Because sometimes trust starts with listening. And right now, we're here to hear you out." The standoff stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, the rogue leader nodded curtly. "Speak then. But know this: if your words are hollow, blood will follow." As the two sides began to talk, Elliot realized something crucial. The Fractured weren't monsters, they were wounded, angry, and lost. just like humans had been countless times throughout history. This revelation ignited a spark of hope within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or brute force, but its capacity for empathy. But as the discussions continued, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest challenges still lay ahead. Bridging the gap between the fractured and the hive would require more than words. It would demand action. And deep down, he knew that action might ultimately fall to him. The negotiations with the fractured were tense, fragile, and fraught with peril. Elliot sat cross-legged on the scorched earth beneath a canopy of gnarled trees, his shoulders stiff as he tried to maintain an air of calm despite the storm brewing around him. Across from him, the rogue leader whose name was Caliph glared, with eyes that burned like embers. Silvara and her loyalist delegation stood nearby, their glowing forms casting eerie shadows over the makeshift meeting ground. Caliph's voice cut through the humid air, sharp and bitter. "You speak of unity," he growled, leaning forward menacingly. "But your hive cast us out when we needed you most. Why should we believe anything has changed?" Silvara stepped forward, her crystalline exoskeleton shimmering faintly. Her light pulsed in slow, deliberate patterns, a visual language meant to convey sincerity. "It is true that mistakes were made," she admitted, her translated words measured but firm. "But abandoning those who stray is not harmony, it is failure. I have come to rectify that." Elliot watched Khalif's reaction carefully. The rogue leader's jagged spines twitched slightly, a sign of agitation or perhaps contemplation. For all their anger, the fractured weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent beings who had been hurt, betrayed, and pushed to the brink. Elliot knew that if there was any hope of reconciliation, they needed to feel heard, not just placated. "Let me tell you something," Elliot interjected, drawing surprised looks from both sides. He turned to face Caliph directly, his tone steady, but earnest. "I've seen humans tear each other apart over pride, fear, and misunderstanding. We've got scars deeper than anyone can imagine. But here's the thing, no matter how bad things get, we always find a way to come back together. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it." Calith's glowing eyes narrowed, studying Elliot intently. "And what makes you think we care about your human struggles?" He spat. "You're not one of us." "No," Elliot agreed, holding up his hands. "But pain doesn't care where it comes from. Betrayal feels the same whether you're human or Zelari. What matters isn't who caused the wound, it's how you heal it." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, unexpectedly, another fractured warrior spoke up. She was smaller than Caliph, her cracked exoskeleton dulled but still strong. "He speaks truth," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of weariness. "We've fought long enough. If the Queen offers peace, maybe it's time to listen." Caliph hesitated, his spines lowering slightly. It was clear that doubt lingered within him, but so did a flicker of hope, a desire to believe that redemption might be possible. Slowly he nodded. "Very well," he said gruffly. "We will hear you out. But know this, if your promises are empty, we will strike without mercy." Back at the Great Hive, preparations for a tentative alliance began in earnest. Silvara convened daily meetings between representatives of the Loyalists and the Fractured, facilitated by Elliot. His role as mediator quickly became indispensable. While the Xylari struggled to bridge their ideological divides, Elliot brought a fresh perspective rooted in empathy and compromise. He encouraged open dialogue, urging both sides to share their grievances and fears without judgment, but progress came at a cost. As days turned into weeks, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some Loyalists resented the presence of the Fractured, viewing them as dangerous outsiders unworthy of trust. Meanwhile, many Fractured remained skeptical of the Hive's intentions, convinced that betrayal lurked just beyond the horizon. Even among the humans, opinions were divided. Some saw Elliot's efforts as noble and necessary, while others accused him of aligning too closely with the Xylari. One evening, after a particularly heated debate, Elliot retreated to the Hall of Reflection to gather his thoughts. Sitting alone amidst the glowing carvings, he stared at the intricate patterns etched into the walls. Each line seemed to pulse faintly, almost as if alive. He wondered if these symbols held secrets wisdom, passed down through generations of Zeluri rulers. Or perhaps they were simply reminders of the fragility of balance. You carry much weight on your shoulders. Silvara's voice broke the silence. She entered the chamber, her light pulsing gently in greeting. Elliot chuckled dryly. Yeah. Well, saving your life apparently comes with perks like diplomatic duties, he replied, rubbing his temples. Honestly, I don't even know why you keep trusting me. I'm just a mechanic from Earth, not some grand philosopher. Silvara tilted her head, her expression unreadable yet oddly warm. Perhaps that is precisely why I trust you, she said. You see solutions where others see only obstacles. You remind us that strength lies not in power, but in connection. Her words struck a chord deep within Elliot. For so long, he'd thought of himself as insignificant, just another cog in the machine trying to survive. But here, on this alien moon, he was proving that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, changing lives in ways he never imagined. The turning point came unexpectedly during a joint patrol mission along the jungle border. A group of loyalists and fractured warriors still wary of one another were ambushed by a pack of venomous predators native to Xylith Prime. Chaos erupted as the creatures lunged, their fangs dripping with poison. In the heat of the moment, instincts took over. Loyalists and fractured fought side by side, their movements syncing seamlessly as they protected one another. When the attack ended, both groups stood panting, their bodies covered in scratches and dirt. Slowly, one of the fractured extended a clawed hand to a loyalist who had fallen. The gesture was small but significant, a spark of trust forged in the crucible of shared danger. Word of the incident spread quickly, reaching Silvara's ears. When she addressed the hive later that evening, her light pulsed brightly with emotion. Today, she declared, we witness the beginning of something new. Unity does not erase our differences, it embraces them. Together we are stronger than we ever were apart. As the crowd murmured in agreement, Elliot felt a swell of pride and relief. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that real change was possible. But even as hope blossomed, he couldn't ignore the lingering challenges ahead. The fractured were still healing and old wounds ran deep. Trust would take time to solidify, yet amidst the uncertainty, one truth shone brightly. Humanity's capacity for understanding and connection had planted a seed. And though the path forward would be difficult, Elliot knew it was a step toward something greater. For both the Xyluri and himself, the fragile alliance between the loyalist, Xyluri and the fractured faced its first true test when a massive environmental disaster struck Xylith Prime. A sudden volcanic eruption in the northern hemisphere sent rivers of molten lava carving through the jungle, destroying everything in their path. The once stable ecosystem began to unravel as ash clouds choked the air, blocking out the twilight glow that sustained the moon's bioluminescent flora. Panic spread across both human settlements and Zeluri territories, forcing every faction to confront the harsh reality of their shared vulnerability. Silvara called an emergency summit at the Great Hive, summoning representatives from all sides including Elliot. The chamber buzzed with tension as leaders debated how to respond. Some loyalists argued for immediate evacuation, while others insisted on fortifying the hive against the encroaching destruction. The fractured, still wary of working alongside the hive, pushed for aggressive measures to divert the lava flow using explosives scavenged from abandoned human technology. Elliot listened intently, his mind racing. He knew that neither retreat nor brute force would solve the problem entirely. What they needed was a solution that combined ingenuity, cooperation, and resourcefulness, qualities he believed humanity could offer. Finally, unable to stay silent any longer, he stood up. We can't just run or fight this, he said firmly, addressing the room. If we want to survive, we need to work together and think differently. Humans have dealt with disasters like this before. We adapt. And right now, we've got resources you might not even realize. He pointed to a map projected on the wall, showing the affected areas. There are underground tunnels left over from our old colony ship. They're reinforced and stable enough to redirect some of the lava flow safely away from the jungle. but it'll take everyone pulling their weight to make it happen. The chamber erupted into murmurs. Several Xylari advisors exchanged rapid pulses of skepticism, while others seemed intrigued by the idea. Keleth, seated among the fractured delegation, leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. "And why should we trust your plan?" he demanded. "This sounds like another way for humans to meddle where they don't belong." Elliot met his gaze squarely, refusing to back down. "Because if we fail, none of us will have anywhere left to go, not humans, not loyalists, not fractured. This isn't about who's in charge anymore. It's survival, plain and simple." Silvara stepped forward, her light pulsing steadily. "Elliot speaks wisely," she declared, her voice carrying authority. "We must act as one or we will perish as many. Let us begin preparations immediately." The effort to save Xylith Prime became a race against time. Teams of humans, loyalists, and fractured worked tirelessly to clear debris and reinforce the ancient tunnels. Elliot coordinated logistics, his mechanical expertise proving invaluable in repairing damaged equipment and rigging makeshift barriers to guide the lava flow. Despite the urgency, old tensions simmered beneath the surface. Arguments broke out, frequently, often escalating into shouting matches or worse, physical altercations. One particularly heated dispute occurred late at night near the edge of the lava zone. A group of fractured workers accused a team of loyalists of hoarding supplies, sparking a standoff that nearly turned violent. Elliot intervened, stepping between the two groups with arms raised. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Fighting each other won't fix anything. If you want to blame someone, blame the volcano, not yourselves." His words fell flat initially, but then something unexpected happened. One of the loyalists, a healer named Varen, stepped forward and extended a bundle of rations to the fractured leader. "Take it," she said softly, her light pulsing gently. "We share what little we have." The gesture stunned everyone into silence. Slowly, reluctantly, the fractured accepted the offering. Though mistrust lingered, the moment marked a small but significant step toward unity. As days passed, the pressure mounted. Exhaustion took its toll on everyone, pushing them to their limits. Elliot barely slept, moving from site to site to ensure progress stayed on track. His injured shoulder throbbed constantly, a reminder of the cost of his earlier bravery. Yet despite the pain, he refused to slow down. Every setback only fueled his determination to see the mission through. The climax came when a critical section of the tunnel collapsed, threatening to undo weeks of hard work. Engineers scrambled to shore up the structure, but the task seemed impossible without risking lives. Just as despair began to creep in, Elliot had an idea. "We can use resin from the hive," he exclaimed, turning to Silvara. "Your people produce it naturally. It's strong enough to patch the breach." Silvara hesitated, her light flickering uncertainly. Diverting such a vital resource would weaken the hive itself potentially, leaving it vulnerable to future threats. But after a long pause, she nodded. "Do what must be done," she said quietly. "For the sake of all." With renewed energy, workers harvested the glowing resin and applied it to the damaged tunnel. The process was painstaking, requiring precise coordination between humans and Xylari. When the final patch was secured, cheers erupted from the exhausted team. For the first time, there was no division between species or factions, only a shared sense of accomplishment, but the victory was short-lived. As the lava flow shifted course, heading safely away from the jungle, a new threat emerged. Scavengers from distant regions, drawn by reports of chaos and destruction, began raiding settlements along the periphery. These opportunistic marauders targeted both humans and Xylari indiscriminately, stealing food, tools, and anything else of value. Elliot realized that saving Xylith Prime wasn't just about stopping the lava. It was about protecting those who called it home. Rallying what remained of their forces, he proposed a bold plan, a joint defense operation led equally by humans, loyalists, and fractured warriors. It was risky, untested, and relied heavily on trust that was still fragile, but it was their only chance. Standing before the assembled coalition, Elliot spoke with quiet conviction. "We've already proven we can work together to beat the odds. Now it's time to show these raiders what happens when you mess with people who refuse to give up. Behind him, Silvara's light pulsed brightly, her expression resolute. Beside her, Calith gave a reluctant nod of agreement. Together, they prepared to face the greatest challenge yet, one that would test not only their strength but also the bonds they'd fought so hard to build. The scavenger raiders struck without warning, their arrival heralded by the distant rumble of engines and the harsh glare of spotlights cutting through the ash-choked twilight. They descended upon a human settlement near the edge of the jungle, a vulnerable outpost already weakened by the volcanic disaster. Panic spread as families scrambled to gather what little they could carry, while makeshift defenses crumbled under the raiders' relentless assault. Elliot and his coalition forces arrived just in time to turn the tide. Riding aboard glowing resin-powered transports crafted by the Xylari, with humans manning repurposed machinery salvaged from old colony wreckage, the combined force launched a coordinated counterattack. Loyalist Xylari warriors moved with precision, their crystalline exoskeletons shimmering like living weapons. Fractured fighters brought raw ferocity, their jagged forms striking fear into the hearts of the invaders. And at the center of it all was Elliot, shouting orders and rallying the troops with a voice that carried both authority and hope. The battle raged fiercely. Raiders fired crude projectiles from mounted turrets, forcing the coalition to take cover behind hastily erected barriers. But the defenders had one advantage the raiders didn't expect: unity. Humans worked side by side with Xylari, each group complementing the other's strengths. Engineers repaired damaged equipment on the fly, while healers tended to wounded fighters regardless of species or faction. Even Calith, who had once been so skeptical of collaboration, fought alongside loyalists with surprising coordination. At one point, Elliot found himself face to face with a raider leader, hulking brute clad in mismatched armor and wielding a massive plasma axe. The man sneered, raising his weapon for a killing blow. But before he could strike, a fractured warrior leaped in front of Elliot, deflecting the attack with her claws. Together, Elliot and the fractured fighter disarmed the raider, subduing him with quick, decisive movements. As the raider fell to his knees, defeated, Elliot looked up to see Calith watching nearby, his glowing eyes flickering with something akin to respect. When the dust settled, the coalition emerged victorious but not unscathed, bodies littered the battlefield, and smoke curled into the sky from burning vehicles and ruined shelters. Yet amidst the devastation, there was an undeniable sense of triumph. The raiders had been driven back, their stolen goods recovered and returned to the settlers. More importantly, the coalition had proven its strength not just as individual factions, but as a unified force. After the battle, Silvara called for a gathering in the Great Hive. Exhausted but proud, Elliot joined the others in the Hall of Reflection, where light patterns danced across the walls in rhythmic celebration. The Queen herself stood at the center of the chamber, her presence radiating calm yet profound emotion. "Today," she began, her translated voice resonating through the room, "we have witnessed the true power of unity. Not merely cooperation, but connection. Each of you has shown courage, resilience, and sacrifice not for yourselves alone, but for the greater good." Her gaze lingered on Elliot, who shifted uncomfortably under the weight of her attention. "Elliot Kane," she continued, "you have taught us much about humanity. Your kind values empathy over dominance, creativity over destruction. You remind us that, even in our darkest moments, we are capable of finding light together." Calith stepped forward then, his spines lowered in a gesture of humility. For the first time since their initial meeting, his tone lacked hostility. "We were wrong to doubt you," he admitted, addressing both Silvara and Elliot. "Humans may be fragile, but your spirit is strong. Perhaps we can learn from you." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The fractured no longer seemed like outsiders. They were part of something larger now. New chapter in the history of Xylith Prime. But it was Elliot's next words that sealed the breakthrough. "This isn't just about learning from each other," he said, standing tall despite his fatigue. "It's about building something better together. We faced disasters, betrayal, and war, and look at us now. If we keep going like this, there's nothing we can't overcome." His declaration was met with cheers from humans, loyalists, and fractured alike. In that moment, the divisions that had once defined them melted away, replaced by a shared vision of the future. The hive wasn't just a home for the Xylari anymore. It was a sanctuary for everyone. As the celebrations continued late into the night, Silvara approached Elliot privately. Her light pulsed softly, almost tenderly. "You have given us more than survival," she said. "You have shown us the heart of humanity. And for that I offer you my deepest gratitude and my bond." Elliot blinked, startled. "Your bond?" he repeated, unsure what she meant. Silvara tilted her head, her expression unreadable yet undeniably sincere. "Among my people, such acts of selflessness deserve recognition beyond words. By saving me, by uniting us, you have earned a place within the hive itself. Should you wish it, you will be honored as Kenna's family." For a moment, Elliot was speechless. He glanced around the glowing hall, taking in the faces of those who had once seen him as insignificant but now regarded him with admiration and trust. Then he smiled, a weary but genuine smile. "I guess I'm stuck here, huh?" he joked softly. "Well, if that's the price of doing the right thing, I'll take it." Silvara's light flared brightly, conveying joy or perhaps something deeper. Whatever it was, Elliot knew he had found something rare and precious. A second chance, not just for himself, but for two species destined to walk the same path. Months passed after the battle against the scavenger raiders, and life on Xylith Prime began to settle into a new rhythm. The volcanic eruption had left scars across the landscape-charred forests, rivers of cooled lava, and ash-laden skies, but signs of renewal were everywhere. Bioluminescent plants slowly reclaimed the scorched earth, their soft glow painting the jungle in hues of green and gold. Human settlements thrived once more, fortified by alliances with both loyalist Xylari and the fractured. Together they rebuilt not just structures but trust. Elliot found himself at the heart of this transformation. No longer seen as an outsider or a mere mechanic, he became a bridge between species, a symbol of unity and resilience. His days were filled with tasks ranging from repairing damaged machinery to mediating disputes between factions. Yet despite the demands, he felt a sense of purpose he'd never known before. For the first time in his life, Elliot Kane mattered. Not because of what he could build, but because of who he was. The great hive itself underwent changes. Walls once reserved solely for loyalists now bore carvings depicting humans and fractured working side by side. Silvara often invited Elliot to join her in the Hall of Reflection, where they discussed plans for the future. She spoke of expanding the hive's influence beyond Xylith Prime, forging connections with other worlds and species. "Your humanity has shown us that strength lies in diversity," she told him one evening, her light pulsing warmly. "Perhaps others will learn from our example." But it wasn't just Silvara who sought Elliot's counsel. Keleth, too, had grown to respect him, even seeking advice on how to integrate the fractured fully into society. Their conversations were awkward at first, marked by long pauses and cautious words. Over time, however, they developed a tentative friendship built on mutual understanding. "You're strange, human," Caliph admitted during one such meeting, "but perhaps that is why you are valuable." One crisp twilight morning, Elliot stood atop a ridge overlooking the jungle, watching as sunlight filtered through the haze. The air smelled faintly of resin and blooming flowers, a reminder of the world's healing process. Beside him stood Silvara, her crystalline form shimmering like a beacon. They had come here to reflect, to celebrate all they had achieved, and consider what lay ahead. "Do you ever wonder if we've done enough?" Elliot asked quietly, breaking the silence. "If we've truly fixed things, or if we're just delaying another disaster?" Silvara tilted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Harmony is not a destination, Elliot. It is a journey, one that requires constant effort and sacrifice. What we have built here is fragile, yes, but it is also strong, because it is built on hope." Her words resonated deeply within him. Hope, that was what had driven him to jump in front of that poisoned arrow, to risk everything for a queen he barely knew. And it was hope that had carried them through battles, betrayals, and natural disasters. Hope had transformed fear into courage, division into unity. As they turned to leave the ridge, Savara paused, her light flickering thoughtfully. "There is one final matter to address," she said. "A question I believe you have been avoiding." Elliot raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight behind her tone. "Oh? And what's that?" She regarded him steadily. "Will you remain here with us as a permanent member of the Hive? Or will you return to your people, carrying our story with you?" The question caught him off guard. He had always assumed he would stay. After all, this was where he belonged. Now. But as he considered her words, memories of Earth surfaced, of blue skies, bustling cities, and the faces of those he had left behind. Could he walk away from the life he had built here? Or did he owe it to humanity to share the lessons of Xylith Prime? For a moment, doubt clouded his mind. Then he remembered something vital. Home wasn't a place, it was connection. Whether among humans or Xyleri, he had found family. And families didn't need to be separated to thrive. "I'll stay," he said finally, his voice firm yet gentle. "But not forever. Someday I'll visit Earth to tell them about us. About what we've created together." Sovara's light flared brightly, conveying approval or perhaps relief. "Then it is settled. You are part of us now, Elliot Kane, forever tied to the Hive and to me." Years later, when tales of Xylith Prime spread across the galaxy, they spoke not of conquest or domination, but of unity born from empathy. Humans, loyalists and fractured, lived side by side, their differences celebrated rather than feared. At the center of it all stood Elliot, a man who had once been underestimated but whose actions had changed the course of history. On his final visit to the ridge, now adorned with carvings honoring the Coalition's triumphs, Elliot gazed out over the jungle one last time. The wind carried the scent of fresh growth, mingled with the hum of distant voices, human laughter blending seamlessly with the rhythmic pulses of Xyleri light. He smiled, feeling peace wash over him. "Sometimes," he murmured to no one in particular, "doing the right thing doesn't need a reason. Sometimes it just needs a heart." And with that, Elliot descended the ridge, ready to face whatever challenges and wonders the future held. For on Xylith Prime, humanity had proven its worth, and the galaxy would never be the same.